The night shift on Orbital Academy Station 7 was always quiet. Marcus Webb preferred it that way. He pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors, the wheels making soft squeaking sounds against the metal floor. The station floated in space above a neutral world, and through the large windows he could see stars scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black cloth. Marcus was a janitor. He cleaned floors, emptied trash bins, and fixed small problems that came up during the night. He was human, which made him unusual on the station. Humans were new to the Galactic Coalition. Most aliens still didn't know much about his species. They thought humans were tough and could survive in harsh places, but nothing special. Marcus liked that. He didn't want to be special. He just wanted to do his job and go home. The station was huge. It housed children from dozens of different alien species. Their parents sent them here to learn about other cultures and to study together. During the day, the halls were full of noise and movement. But at night, when the young ones slept, Marcus walked alone through the quiet spaces. He liked the peace. It helped him not think too much about things he'd lost. He was cleaning near the dormitory wing when he heard it, a small sound like whimpering. Marcus stopped pushing his cart and listened. There it was again, coming from around the corner near the environmental control room. Marcus walked toward the sound. The temperature felt wrong in this corridor. Too cold. His breath came out in small clouds. Something was broken. The heating system must have failed in this section. Then he saw it. Curled in the corner was a small creature, maybe the size of a large dog, but it wouldn't stay that size for long. Marcus recognized the species immediately. Velkari. They were famous across the galaxy, apex predators from a death world. Adult Velkari stood 3 meters tall with claws that could tear through steel. They were hunters, fighters, and feared by most other species, but this was a cub, a child. And it was shaking from the cold. The cub's fur was thick and gray with darker stripes along its back. Its large eyes reflected the dim emergency lights. When it saw Marcus, it made a small frightened sound and pressed harder against the wall. Its claws scraped against the metal floor. Marcus should have called someone. That was the protocol. But the cub was shivering so hard. Its lips were turning blue and its breathing came in quick gasps. There wasn't time to wait. He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly. His voice was calm, the way he used to talk to his daughter when she had nightmares. "You're pretty cold, aren't you?" The cub watched him with wide, frightened eyes. It didn't move. Marcus looked at his jacket. It was a thermal coat, designed for humans working in the cold sections of space stations. It kept him warm even when life support had problems. Slowly, carefully, he took it off. The cold hit him immediately. Marcus sucked in a breath. It was freezing in this corridor. His arms broke out in goosebumps and he could feel the chill sinking into his bones. But he'd been colder. He'd survived worse. He held out the jacket toward the cub. "Here, this will help." The Velkari cub stared at the jacket, then at Marcus. Its nose twitched, smelling him. Marcus knew what it smelled. Prey. Humans were prey animals to Velkari, weak, soft, food. But Marcus didn't move away. He just kept holding out the jacket, his arms starting to shake from the cold. After a long moment, the cub reached out one clawed hand. It took the jacket carefully as if expecting a trick. When nothing bad happened, it pulled the jacket around its small body. The material was huge on the cub. It wrapped the thermal coat around itself like a blanket. The shivering slowed. The cub's breathing became less frantic. Marcus sat down on the cold floor, keeping some distance but staying close enough that the cub knew it wasn't alone. His teeth wanted to chatter, but he clenched his jaw. "Better?" he asked. The cub nodded. It was a human gesture, but most species in the coalition had adopted it. The small translator device clipped to the cub's ear blinked, processing Marcus's words into something it could understand. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. The cub made a sound, a series of clicks and growls. The translator spoke in a flat electronic voice. "Krishanak, that's a strong name," Marcus said. He smiled gently. "I'm Marcus. I work here at night. How did you get separated from your group?" Krishnak's ears drooped. The cub explained in halting words that it had been exploring after evening activities. It had wanted to see the observation deck, but it had gotten lost and then the corridor had become so cold. It had been too frightened and too cold to move. Marcus listened and nodded. "That sounds scary. But you're safe now. I won't leave you, okay? We'll wait together until help comes. He tapped his communicator and called maintenance. They said it would take 20 minutes to reach this section. A heating unit had failed and they needed to reroute power. Marcus told them about the cub and that he would stay until they arrived. For 20 minutes, Marcus sat on that freezing floor. His fingers went numb. His whole body shook, but he kept talking to Krishnak in a soft, calm voice. He told the cub about stars and planets. He described Earth, the human homeworld, with its blue oceans and green forests. He talked about anything that might distract a frightened child from the cold and dark. Krishnak listened, wrapped in the warm jacket. The cub's eyes never left Marcus's face. When maintenance finally arrived with portable heaters, Marcus's lips were blue and he could barely feel his hands. The maintenance workers were shocked to see a human sitting in the freezing corridor with a Velkhari cub. "Sir, you should have left," one of them said. "This temperature is dangerous for humans." Marcus shook his head slowly. His voice was quiet but firm. "Couldn't leave. Made a promise." As the corridor warmed, Marcus stood on shaky legs. He reached out to take his jacket back, but Krishnak clutched it tighter. The cub looked up at him with those huge eyes. "It's okay," Marcus said. "You can keep it tonight. I have another one." He didn't, but that didn't matter. Marcus walked with Krishnak back to the Velkhari dormitory section. The doors were heavy and marked with warning signs in multiple languages. Inside, he could hear sounds of movement. Other cubs awake and waiting. When the door opened, Marcus saw them. Dozens of eyes glowing in the dim light. The entire Velkhari clutch was there, watching. They had known one of their own was missing. They had been waiting. Krishnak chirped something in the Velkhari language and ran to the others. The cubs surrounded their missing clutchmate, checking for injuries, making comforting sounds. But their eyes kept looking back at Marcus. He stood in the doorway, shivering in just his thin uniform shirt. He raised one hand in a small wave. "Good night," he said simply. As he turned to walk away, Marcus heard something. A low sound like a rumble. He looked back. Every single Velkhari cub was making the sound. Their translator devices blinked but didn't speak. The sound was too complex, too layered with meaning. But Marcus felt what it meant. Deep in his chest. Respect. Gratitude. Recognition. He walked back to his janitor's closet alone, looking forward to finishing his shift and getting some sleep. Marcus didn't think about the cubs again that night. He had done what anyone would do. He had helped a child in trouble. It never occurred to him that he had just changed everything. Marcus arrived for his shift the next evening, expecting everything to be normal. He clocked in, grabbed his cart, and headed toward his usual starting point near the main corridors. But when he reached his janitor's closet to get supplies, he stopped and stared. There were Velkhari cubs everywhere. 12 of them lay curled around his closet door. Some were sleeping. Others were awake, their ears perked up and alert. When they saw Marcus, they all stood up at once. Their tails started wagging. Marcus blinked. He looked around, confused. Hello," he said awkwardly. The cubs rushed toward him. They didn't jump on him or knock him down, but they surrounded him, making happy chirping sounds. Their noses pressed against his hands and legs, sniffing him. Several of them rubbed their heads against his side. Marcus recognized Krishnak among them. The small cub still had his thermal jacket wrapped around its shoulders like a cape. Krishnak chirped something, and the translator said, "Guardian came back. Told Clutch Guardian would come back." "I work here," Marcus said slowly. "I come every night." "But you shouldn't sleep here. Don't you have beds? Your dormitory?" The cubs looked at each other. One of the larger ones, with scars already forming on its snout from rough play, spoke through its translator. "We stay with Guardian. This is proper." Marcus rubbed his face. This was a problem. He pulled out his communicator and called his supervisor. "Hey, Tom, we've got a situation down in Corridor 12. There are Velkhari cubs outside my closet, and they won't leave." His supervisor's voice crackled back. "What do you mean they won't leave?" "Tell them to go back to their dormitory. I tried that. They're not listening." There was a long pause. "Don't move. I'm calling station security." Within 15 minutes, the corridor was full of people. Station security arrived first, but they kept their distance from the cubs. Velkhari were dangerous even as children. Then came the dormitory supervisors, looking worried and confused. Finally, station administration showed up, led by Director Chen, a small woman with gray hair who ran the entire academy. Director Chen stopped when she saw the scene. Marcus stood in the middle of 12 Velkari cubs. They had formed a loose circle around him, not threatening, just present. Protective. "Mr. Webb," Director Chen said carefully. "Can you explain this?" Marcus spread his hands helplessly. "I found one of them cold and scared last night. I gave him my jacket and stayed with him. That's all. Now they're all here and I don't know why." One of the dormitory supervisors, an alien with 4 arms and blue skin, spoke up. His voice was nervous. "This is unprecedented. Velkari young don't bond with other species. They barely tolerate their own teachers." The director pulled out her communicator. "I'm calling the Velkari ambassador. This needs to be handled at a diplomatic level." While they waited, Marcus tried again to convince the cubs to return to their dormitory. "You need to eat dinner. You need to sleep in your proper beds. I'll still be here tomorrow night." Krishnak shook its head firmly. "Guardian is here." "We stay with Guardian." The other cubs made agreeing sounds. Marcus sighed. "I'm just a janitor. I'm not your guardian." The cubs looked at him like he'd said something ridiculous. Ambassador Sharik arrived an hour later. She was a fully grown Velkari, massive and imposing. She stood over 3 meters tall, and her claws clicked against the floor as she walked. Every human and most of the other aliens took a step back when they saw her. The cubs, however, ran to greet her. They chirped and made happy sounds, rubbing against her legs. Ambassador Sharik touched each cub gently with her claws, checking them for injuries or signs of distress. Then she turned to look at Marcus. Her eyes were golden and sharp. Marcus felt like prey under that gaze, but he stood his ground. He'd learned long ago that showing fear to predators only made things worse. Ambassador Sharik walked toward him. The cubs moved aside to let her through. She stopped right in front of Marcus, so close he could feel the heat from her body and smell the sharp scent of her fur. She leaned down and sniffed him. A deep, long sniff. Marcus stayed very still. When she straightened up, Ambassador Sharik's expression was unreadable. She turned to Director Chen. "Explain what happened." The director told her everything they knew. About the cold corridor. About Marcus giving up his jacket. About him staying with the frightened cub despite the dangerous temperature. About how the cubs now refused to leave his side. Ambassador Sharik listened without interrupting. When the director finished, the ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was deep and resonant. The translator rendered her words into clear English. "You do not understand what has happened here. None of you do." She gestured at Marcus. "This human has been recognized as a Den Guardian." The alien staff members gasped. Even Director Chen looked shocked. "What's a Den Guardian?" Marcus asked. Ambassador Sharik turned to him. "In Velkari culture, Den Guardians are the protectors of the young. They are warriors who have proven themselves fearless and selfless. They guard the cubs when parents hunt. They teach. They protect. It is one of the highest honors in our society. But I'm not Velkari," Marcus said. "No," the ambassador agreed. "You are not. That is what makes this so extraordinary. Our cubs have never recognized an alien as Den Guardian. Never in our recorded history." She looked at the cubs, who were watching the conversation with interest. Cubs know instinctively who can be trusted to protect them. They sense fear, dishonesty, weakness, but they also sense strength, courage, and genuine care. Last night, this human showed all of those qualities. Director Chen stepped forward. "Ambassador, with all respect, this is highly irregular. Mr. Webb is a janitor. He's not trained for childcare. We can't have the cub sleeping outside his closet. Why was the cub alone in a freezing corridor?" Ambassador Sharik's voice was suddenly sharp. "Where were your supervisors? Your safety systems?" The director looked uncomfortable. "It was a malfunction. We're investigating. And while you investigated, a child nearly froze. But a janitor saved them." Ambassador Sharik's tail lashed once. "Perhaps your priorities are wrong." The tension in the corridor was thick. Marcus cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. "Can I make a suggestion?" he asked quietly. "Please," Director Chen said. "What if I take my break time in the Velkari dormitory area? I can visit for an hour or two each shift. Would that satisfy them? Then they can stay in their proper quarters but still see me regularly." Krishnak translated this for the other cubs in their own language. There was a moment of discussion among the young Velkari. Then they all nodded. "We agree," Krishnak said. "Guardian visits. We stay in Den. This is acceptable." Ambassador Sharik looked at Marcus with something that might have been approval. You bargain well, very well. The cubs will return to their quarters, but Mr. Webb must be allowed access to visit them. That's fine, Director Chen said, looking relieved. And, Ambassador Sharrock continued, any staff member who treats Mr. Webb with disrespect for being just a janitor will answer to me personally. No one argued with that. As the cubs were led back to their dormitory, Kirschnock stopped and pulled off Marcus's thermal jacket. The cub had worn it all day. It handed the jacket back carefully, then made a low rumbling sound. The Guardian's warmth stays with Clutch, the translator said. Clutch shares warmth with Guardian. This is the way. Marcus took his jacket back. It smelled like cub, like dust and something wild. He smiled. Thank you for taking care of it. That night, Marcus did his rounds as usual. But at his break time, he walked to the Valkyrie dormitory. The cubs were waiting. They gathered around him, and he sat on the floor while they curled up nearby. Some slept. Others played quietly. A few just sat and watched him with content expressions. Marcus told them stories. About Earth, about stars, about brave people from history. The cubs listened with fascination. Word spread quickly through the station. By the next day, everyone knew about the human janitor who had become a den guardian to Valkyrie cubs. Some people thought it was wonderful. Others thought it was dangerous and strange. But in the dormitory wing, where younglings from across the galaxy lived and learned, something was changing. Other species cubs started watching Marcus when he passed by. They saw how the Valkyrie, the feared predators, trusted him completely, and they began to wonder if maybe they could trust him too. 3 days after the incident with the Valkyrie cubs, Marcus was called to Director Chen's office. He'd never been there before. The office was high up in the station's administrative tower, with a view of space that made Marcus feel small. The director wasn't alone. Around the conference table sat several important-looking aliens in official coalition uniforms. They all turned to look at Marcus when he entered. "Mr. Webb, please sit down," Director Chen said. Her voice was formal, careful. Marcus sat. His janitor's uniform felt very plain compared to all the fancy clothes around him. One of the aliens, a tall being with purple skin and too many eyes, spoke first. "I am Counselor Vex of the Galactic Coalition Education Committee. We have some questions about your interaction with the Valkyrie young." "Okay," Marcus said simply. "You gave your thermal protection to a Valkyrie cub while in a dangerously cold environment." "Why?" Marcus blinked. "Because the cub was cold and scared. But Valkyrie are a predator species. They are dangerous." "Did you not fear for your safety?" "It was a child," Marcus said. "Children aren't dangerous. They're just scared sometimes." Another committee member leaned forward. This one looked like a large insect with crystalline wings. "But you are human. Your species is new to the coalition. We know very little about you. Some believe this bonding behavior might be a form of manipulation." Marcus felt a flash of anger but kept his voice calm. "I'm not manipulating anyone. I helped a kid who needed help." "That's it." Counselor Vex tapped something on a data pad. "We have reviewed your personal history, Mr. Webb. You lost your family 3 years ago in a transport accident. Your wife and daughter died when life support failed during a colony transport mission." The room went silent. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Yes. Is it possible," the counselor continued, "that you are projecting your own loss onto these alien children, using them to fill an emotional void?" Marcus's hands clenched under the table. But before he could answer, the door opened. Ambassador Sharrock entered, followed by 3 adult Valkyrie. They were huge, imposing figures that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "This hearing was supposed to include the Valkyrie delegation," Sharrock said coldly. "Yet it began without us." Curious, Counselor Vex looked annoyed. "We were simply conducting a preliminary interview. You were interrogating a person who saved one of our cubs." Sharrock sat down at the table. The chair groaned under her weight. "Continue your questions, but we will hear them too." The questioning went on for over an hour. They asked Marcus about his intentions, his background, his training. They asked why he chose to be a janitor when he had engineering qualifications. They asked if he had any psychological evaluations. Marcus answered honestly. He explained that after his family died, he couldn't work on ships anymore. Every time he heard a life support alarm, he had panic attacks, but he still needed to work, needed to be around people. The janitor job was quiet, simple, and let him help keep spaces clean and safe. And the children? Counselor Vex asked. Why did you choose to work at an academy? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I guess I wanted to be around kids again. Even if they weren't human. Even if I couldn't really be part of their lives. Just knowing they were safe. That they were growing up in a place where the life support worked and people cared about them. It helped. Ambassador Sharik made a low sound. He carries the scent of lost pack. Our cubs smelled it immediately. That is why they trust him so completely. Explain, Counselor Vex demanded. In Velkari culture, the best den guardians are often those who have lost their own young. They carry that loss like a scar, and it makes them fiercer in protecting others. They understand how precious life is, how quickly it can be taken. Sharik looked at Marcus. This human has that same quality. One of the other Velkari delegates, an older male with silver fur, spoke up. His voice was gravelly and deep. My mate and I are parents to Kershnak, the cub this human protected. We arrived on station yesterday. We have observed Mr. Webb with our cub and the entire clutch. And, the counselor asked, we see no manipulation, no deception. We see only genuine care. When Mr. Webb visits, he does not demand attention. He sits quietly. He answers questions when asked. He tells stories. He makes no attempt to separate the cubs from their culture or families. He simply exists as a steady, kind presence. The male Velkari leaned forward. I am a warrior. I have fought in 17 campaigns. I can smell fear, aggression, and dishonesty. This human has none of those things. He has only sadness, kindness, and a protective instinct that rivals our own people. Counselor Vex looked frustrated. But this is unprecedented. Humans have been in the coalition for less than 5 standard years. We don't know enough about your species to understand these behaviors. Then perhaps you should learn, Ambassador Sharik said sharply, instead of assuming the worst. The argument went back and forth. Marcus sat and listened, feeling more and more uncomfortable. Finally, Director Chen interrupted. If I may suggest something, she said. Why don't we implement a trial period? Mr. Webb can continue his current arrangement with supervised observation. We document everything. At the end of 30 days, we review the situation. Counselor Vex didn't look happy, but he nodded. Very well. But Mr. Webb will need to undergo regular evaluations. And if there is any sign that this situation is harmful to the younglings, it ends immediately. Agreed, Ambassador Sharik said. Marcus just wanted to go back to work. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus's life changed in ways he hadn't expected. Scientists and observers followed him around, taking notes on everything he did. It was annoying and made him self-conscious, but he tried to act normal. The Velkari cubs didn't care about the observers. They continued to seek Marcus out during his break times. They told him about their day, showed him their schoolwork, and asked endless questions about Earth and humans. But something else was happening too. One night, while Marcus was cleaning near the junior dormitories, a small creature approached him. It looked like a caterpillar made of crystal, about the length of his forearm. Marcus recognized the species. Threxian. They were silicon-based life forms that communicated through light pulses. The Threxian grub was trembling, its crystalline body flickering with uncertain colors. Marcus knelt down slowly. Hey there, he said softly. Are you lost? The grub's translator device, attached to its body with a special harness, spoke in a small voice. Scared, heard loud noise. Can't find cluster mates, that's okay. Let's find them together. Where is your dormitory? The grub pointed with one of its small manipulator appendages. Marcus stood and gestured for it to follow. As they walked, Marcus talked quietly, explaining that the loud noise was probably just the air recyclers doing their regular maintenance cycle. When they reached the Threxian dormitory, the grub's clustermates rushed out. They surrounded the lost grub, flashing lights in complex patterns. Then they all turned toward Marcus and flashed in unison. The translator spoke. Gratitude. The soft one is kind. After that, word spread even faster. Marcus started finding younglings from different species approaching him. A Quinn child who looked like a small walking plant asked him about water cycles. A Draxian young with scales and multiple tails wanted to know if Earth had good rocks for nest building. Marcus answered their questions and helped when he could. He wasn't trying to befriend them. He was just being himself, being kind the way he'd always tried to be. But the coalition observers saw something different. They saw a human who could bridge species barriers without even trying. They saw younglings from historically hostile species sitting together in Marcus's presence, talking and playing without fear or aggression. The reports they sent back to the coalition were filled with words like unprecedented, remarkable, and potentially significant. Marcus just thought he was doing his job and being decent to kids. On the 15th day of observation, something happened that changed everything. A fight broke out in one of the common areas. Two species whose homeworlds were at war sent their cubs to the academy as a peace gesture. But old hatreds died hard, and the younglings had gotten into an argument that turned physical. Station security was called, but by the time they arrived, Marcus was already there. He stood between the fighting cubs, his arms spread wide, his voice firm but not angry. "Stop. Right now, stop." The cubs stopped, shocked. One of them, a reptilian young with sharp teeth, hissed at Marcus. "This not your business, human." "Yes, it is," Marcus said calmly. "You're fighting in a hallway where someone could get hurt. You could damage station equipment, and more importantly, you're scaring the other kids," he pointed. Several smaller younglings were watching from doorways, their eyes wide with fear. "Whatever you're angry about, there are better ways to handle it. Talk, use words. If that doesn't work, ask a teacher for help. But fighting? That doesn't solve anything. It just makes everyone feel worse." The two cubs looked ashamed. They separated, mumbling apologies. Marcus made sure both were okay, checked that no one was injured, and then calmly reported the incident to the proper authorities. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes, but every single observer had seen it. They had seen Marcus step between two aggressive predator species without hesitation. They had seen him de-escalate a potentially dangerous situation with nothing but calm words and common sense. The alarm started at 0300 station time. Marcus was in the middle of mopping a floor when the lights suddenly shifted to emergency red. A harsh klaxon blared through the corridors and his communicator crackled to life. "All personnel, this is Director Chen. We have a containment breach in Xenobiology Research Lab 4. Exotic radiation leak. Evacuation protocols are now in effect for all dormitory sections." "This is not a drill." Marcus's heart jumped. He abandoned his mop and started running toward the dormitory wings. The labs were 2 levels below the living quarters, but radiation could spread through ventilation systems. The younglings would be scared and confused. When he reached the first dormitory hall, it was chaos. Cubs and younglings of every species poured out of their rooms in panic. Some were crying. Others were frozen in fear. The adult supervisors were trying to organize an evacuation, but different species had different fear responses. The Threxian grubs locked up completely, their bodies going rigid and dark. The Velkari cubs became aggressive, snapping at anyone who came too close. The Quinn younglings wilted, their leaf-like bodies curling up as they shut down. The flying species tried to escape through closed windows, hurting themselves against the reinforced glass. It was a disaster. Marcus grabbed the nearest supervisor, a 4-armed Hexian. "Where are we evacuating to?" "Upper decks, emergency shelters." "But we can't move them. They're too panicked." The supervisor's voice was breaking. "We're trained for normal evacuations, not this. Not when they're this afraid." Marcus looked at the chaos and made a decision. He climbed onto a bench and shouted, "Everyone, listen to me." His voice wasn't the loudest, but something in it made the younglings pause. Maybe it was the calmness. Maybe it was the authority. Maybe it was because many of them recognized him. "I know you're scared," Marcus said, his voice carrying down the hall, "but we need to move together. We need to help each other. The older ones will help the younger ones. The strong will help the scared. That's what we do. That's what Guardians do." From the crowd, Krishnak's voice rang out. "Guardian is here. We follow Guardian." The Velkari cubs immediately moved toward Marcus. Their presence had an instant effect. When the most dangerous predator species on the station showed calm and trust, other species noticed. Marcus pointed at the older Velkari cubs. You, and you. Each of you take 3 younger kids from different species. Stay with them. Keep them calm. Can you do that?" The cubs nodded and immediately moved to gather the smaller younglings. Marcus turned to the Threxian grubs, who were still locked up in fear. "I need the Quinn younglings to help me. Your cluster mates are scared and can't move. We need to carry them. Can you do that?" The plant-based children stood taller. They weren't usually given important jobs. They were often seen as weak. But Marcus was asking them for help. They moved forward and began gently lifting the frozen grubs, their flexible branches perfect for the task. "Flying species," Marcus called out. "I need you to go ahead to the emergency shelters. When you get there, tell the staff how many are coming and what species. They need to prepare the right environments. This is an important mission." The flyers, given a purpose instead of being trapped, immediately took off down the corridor. Marcus organized them all. He put the naturally calm species with the panicky ones. He paired predator cubs with prey younglings, forcing them to focus on protecting each other instead of their instinctive fears. He made everyone responsible for someone else, and slowly, incredibly, the chaos became order. They moved through the corridors in groups. Marcus walked in the middle, his voice steady, calling out instructions and encouragement. The supervisors followed his lead, amazed at how well it was working. But when they reached Junction 7, they found their path blocked. An emergency seal had closed, cutting off the route to the upper decks. Red warning lights flashed above the sealed door. "Radiation levels rising on the other side," one supervisor said, checking their scanner. "We can't go this way. Is there another route?" Marcus asked. "Yes, but it adds 10 minutes to the evacuation." "We don't have 10 minutes. The radiation is spreading faster than predicted." Marcus looked at the seal, then at the vent above it. There was an access tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridor. It was small, designed for maintenance. An adult in a radiation suit couldn't fit through it. But a human without a suit could, barely. "Where does that vent go?" Marcus asked. The supervisor checked their data pad. "It connects to the emergency stairwell on the other side of the seal. But sir, you can't. The radiation levels in there are already elevated. You'd need a suit?" "How many younglings are trapped on the other side?" The supervisor checked their scanner. "Sensors show 17 life signs in Section 9B. Mixed species. They can't reach the emergency vent exit. They're too scared and the radiation is making them sick." Marcus looked at the vent, then at the crowd of younglings watching him. He thought about his daughter, about how she'd been trapped in a failing transport, scared and alone while he'd been too far away to help. He couldn't save her. But he could save these kids. "Tell me how to reach them," Marcus said. "Sir, I must advise against this. The radiation exposure could be fatal. I'm human. We're tough. We survive harsh environments, remember? That's what everyone says about us." Marcus pulled open the vent cover. "Tell me how to navigate the tunnel and where to find those kids." The supervisor hesitated, then pulled up a schematic on their data pad, showing Marcus the route. "Straight for 30 meters, left at the junction, then down through the vertical shaft. The vent opens in the common room where they're trapped." Marcus nodded. He turned to Kershnak. "Keep everyone calm. Keep them moving to the upper decks. Don't wait for me." The cub's eyes were wide. "Guardian will come back?" "I'll try my best," Marcus said honestly. He climbed into the vent before anyone could stop him. It was tight, barely wide enough for his shoulders. The metal was hot to the touch and the air tasted wrong, metallic and sharp. Marcus crawled forward. His communicator crackled. The supervisor's voice came through, distorted but understandable. "You're doing great, Mr. Webb, 30 meters straight." His arms burned. His knees scraped against the metal. The heat was getting worse and he could feel his skin prickling. That was the radiation. He'd studied emergency procedures when he worked as an engineer. He knew what radiation exposure felt like. He kept crawling. "Left turn coming up," the voice in his communicator said. Marcus made the turn. The tunnel sloped downward. He half slid, half crawled down the vertical shaft. The heat was intense now. His hands were starting to blister. Then he saw light ahead. The vent opening. Marcus kicked out the vent cover and dropped into the room. 17 younglings huddled in the corner, whimpering and crying. They were from 5 different species, including 2 Velkari cubs who were trying to protect the others, but were clearly terrified themselves. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from the bad air. "Your guardian is here. We're getting out of here." The younglings looked at him like he was a miracle. Marcus checked the room. There was an emergency exit, but the door controls were fried. The vent the kids were supposed to escape through was too high for most of them to reach, and they were too weak and scared to climb. But Marcus could lift them, one by one. He picked up the younglings and lifted them into the vent. The older, stronger ones he instructed to help pull up the younger ones once they were inside. His arms shook with effort. His vision was starting to blur and he could taste blood in his mouth. But he kept lifting, kept pushing them toward safety. The last youngling was a tiny Quinn child, barely a sprout. Marcus lifted it up gently and handed it to one of the Velkari cubs waiting in the vent. "Go," Marcus said. "Follow the tunnel. It leads to safety." "What about you, Guardian?" the Velkari cub asked. Marcus looked at the vent. It had been tight for him when he was fresh. Now, with his hands blistered and his body weak from radiation, he wasn't sure he could make the climb. "I'll find another way," he lied. "Go. Keep them safe." The cubs hesitated, then followed his order. Marcus heard them crawling away through the vent. He sat down heavily against the wall. His communicator crackled. "Mr. Webb, emergency teams are trying to reach you." "Hold on. Tell the kids. Tell them they were brave," Marcus said. His voice was fading. "Tell Kirshenok. Kept my promise. Stay awake, Marcus. Stay with us," but the darkness was pulling him down. Marcus closed his eyes, and his last thought was relief. They were safe. The kids were safe, that's all that mattered. Marcus woke up slowly. Everything felt heavy and distant, like he was underwater. Sounds reached him in muffled waves. Beeping machines. Soft voices. The hum of medical equipment. He tried to open his eyes. The light hurt, so he closed them again. He's waking up. A voice he didn't recognize, clinical, professional. "Marcus?" A different voice, familiar, Director Chen. "Marcus, can you hear me?" He managed to nod slightly. Even that small movement was exhausting. "You're in the medical bay. You've been unconscious for 3 days. The radiation exposure was severe, but the doctors say you'll recover. You're going to be okay." 3 days. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Someone held a cup to his lips and he sipped cool water. After a moment, he tried again. "The kids?" His voice was barely a whisper. "All safe," Director Chen said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Every single one. Because of you." Relief flooded through Marcus, and he let himself sink back into darkness. This time it was just sleep. When he woke again, it was quieter. The lights were dimmed. He managed to open his eyes and keep them open. He was in a private medical room. Machines surrounded his bed, monitoring his vital signs. His arms were bandaged, and he could feel the tight sting of healing skin underneath. Someone was sitting in a chair beside his bed. Ambassador Sharik. The massive Velkari looked strange in the small hospital chair, like a tiger trying to fit in a dollhouse. "You are awake," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Marcus croaked. "You're also an idiot," she said, but her tone was gentle. "Going into a radiation zone without protection. You could have died. The kids couldn't wait. No, they could not." Sharik leaned forward. "Do you know what you have done, Marcus Webb? You have shown the entire Galactic Coalition what humans truly are." Marcus didn't understand. "I just did what anyone would do." "That is where you are wrong. Not anyone would do it. Most species have strong survival instincts. They protect their own first, but you ran toward danger to save younglings who were not your species, not your pack, not even your world." Her golden eyes gleamed. "You risked your life for children you had known for only weeks." She stood and walked to the window. "The recordings from the evacuation have been reviewed by the Coalition Education Committee. They saw how you organized the younglings, how you made them work together across species lines, how you gave each one purpose and dignity even in their fear. I was just trying to keep them calm. You did more than that. You showed them what cooperation looks like, what trust looks like." Sharik turned back to him. "And then you went into that tunnel. We have the audio from your communicator. The medical team calculated your radiation exposure. You knew the danger. You went anyway." Marcus didn't know what to say. He had just done what he had to do. "The Velkari people wish to honor you," Sharik said. "You have earned the title of Den Guardian not just in custom but in deed. You have protected cubs with your own life. That is the highest calling in our culture." "I'm not Velkari," Marcus said again. "No, but you have a Velkari heart." She reached out and placed one massive clawed hand gently on his shoulder. "Rest now, Guardian. Your cubs are waiting to see you." Over the next few days, Marcus learned what had happened while he was unconscious. The younglings he had saved had been found by emergency teams within minutes of his collapse. They had all been treated for minor radiation exposure and released. Marcus had received the worst of it because he'd been exposed the longest. The story had spread across the station and beyond. News agencies from a dozen coalition worlds were requesting interviews. The Galactic Coalition Education Committee had dropped their investigation. Instead, they were talking about new protocols, new positions, new ways of thinking about interspecies education, but Marcus didn't care about any of that. What mattered was the stack of drawings, gifts, and handmade cards that filled his medical room. A Velkari honor blade, child-sized, from Krishnak. A singing crystal from a Threxian grub that pulsed with gentle light. Pressed flowers from the Quinn younglings. A smooth rock carefully polished from a Draxian child. Dozens of drawings showing Marcus in various heroic poses, most of them wildly inaccurate but clearly made with love. And messages. So many messages. From the younglings, from their parents, from species he'd never even met. The humans showed us that courage is not about strength, but about caring. He treated our child with dignity when others showed only fear. We thought humans were just survivors. We did not know they were guardians. On his 4th day in medical, Director Chen visited with important news. The Coalition Education Committee wants to create a new position. They're calling it the Guardian Protocol. It would allow individuals who demonstrate exceptional care for younglings across species lines to work officially in interspecies youth programs. Okay, Marcus said, not sure why she was telling him this. They want you to be the first guardian. It's a real position with a real salary, better than janitorial pay. You'd work with younglings directly, help facilitate interspecies cooperation, act as a mediator and protector. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I like being a janitor. Director Chen smiled. You can still work night shifts if you want. But Marcus, this is an opportunity to do what you've already been doing. But with official support and resources, you'd be helping shape how the next generation sees each other. I don't know if I'm qualified for that. You crawled through a radioactive tunnel to save 17 kids who weren't even your species. I'd say you're qualified. Marcus thought about it. About his daughter who would never grow up. About his wife who had always said he had too much heart for his own good. About the younglings on this station who had found something in him that he hadn't even known he still had. Can I think about it? He asked. Take all the time you need, but the kids are really hoping you say yes. They let him have visitors on the 5th day. The medical staff warned him it might be overwhelming, but Marcus insisted. He wanted to see them. The younglings came in small groups supervised by their teachers and parents. The Velkari cubs came first, of course. They were gentle, careful not to hurt him with their excited greetings. Krishnak curled up at the foot of his bed and refused to move. Guardian came back, the cub said. Told Clutch Guardian always comes back. The other species came throughout the day. Each one brought a small gift or a message. Each one wanted to tell Marcus what he'd done for them. Not just during the emergency, but in all the small moments before. The kind words. The patient answers to questions. The way he treated them like they mattered. By the end of the day, Marcus was exhausted but smiling. Really smiling for the first time in 3 years. Ambassador Sharik visited one last time before he was discharged. She brought her mate, Krishnak's father. The massive male warrior bowed his head to Marcus. In our culture, when someone saves a cub's life, they become bloodkin. You are family now, Marcus Webb. If you ever need the strength of the Velkari, you need only ask. Marcus was overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you will continue to be who you are. Say you will keep protecting the young. That is all we ask. Marcus was released from medical a week after the incident. He took 2 days off to recover fully, then reported back to work. But things were different now. His janitor's closet had been moved to a larger space. Inside there was a desk, a comfortable chair, and shelves for all the gifts he'd received. His name was on the door, with a new title underneath, Marcus Webb, Guardian. He'd accepted the position. 6 months later, Marcus walked the corridors of Station 7 during his night shift. He still preferred the quiet hours. But now, when he walked, he was often accompanied by younglings who couldn't sleep or needed someone to talk to. Tonight, a small group followed him. 2 Velkari cubs, a Threxian grub, a Quinn youngling, and a species he'd just met last week that looked like a floating jellyfish. They chattered and played as Marcus did his rounds, checking systems and cleaning spaces that needed attention. A new teacher had arrived that day, a human woman named Sarah, who would be teaching interspecies literature. She stopped Marcus in the corridor, looking amazed at the mixed group of younglings following him. Is it true? She asked. What they say about you? That humanity's role in the galaxy is to be guardians? Marcus looked at the younglings playing together, a predator and prey species, carbon and silicon-based life, children from worlds that had been at war with each other for generations. They played together without fear because someone had shown them they could trust each other. No, Marcus said thoughtfully. Humanity's role isn't to be guardians. Our role is to remind everyone else that they can be guardians too. We're just stubborn enough to go first. He smiled at the new teacher. Welcome to the station. The kids are going to love you. As he continued his rounds, Marcus thought about how far he'd come. 3 years ago, he'd been broken, hollow, just going through the motions of living. He'd taken this job to hide from his pain, to be near children without the risk of caring too much. But the universe had other plans. A cold corridor, a frightened cub, a simple act of kindness. And everything had changed. He still missed his daughter. He always would. But now, when he looked at the younglings around him, he didn't just see his loss. He saw possibility. He saw hope.